You have cleaned that toilet more times than you can count this year. There is a bottle under the sink, maybe two, maybe a special brush you bought, hoping it would finally do the job. You get down on the floor. You scrub until your shoulder aches. And when you stand back up, that brown ring is still sitting there at the waterline, patient, like it belongs. You can picture it right now without even walking to the bathroom. Maybe you have started closing the lid before company comes. Maybe you steer guests to a different bathroom, quietly, so nobody has to see it. I have heard this from more women than I can count, and every time, they think it's just their house, their fault, their bad habit. My name is Anna Beiler. I am Amish. I keep house on the farm my husband's grandfather built with his own two hands, out here in the county. My toilets are white. Not gray at the base, not ringed at the waterline, not creeping brown up the sides. White, the way porcelain looks the day it comes out of the kiln. I clean them twice a year, spring and fall. That is the whole schedule. Not once a week like most of the women I talk to feel they have to. Twice a year, about 30 minutes each time, and it costs me close to $1. I want to walk you through exactly what I use, where it came from, and how my mother taught me to use it, the same way her mother taught her. And I want to tell you plainly why almost nobody knows about it anymore, even though it never went anywhere. It has been sitting on store shelves this whole time under a different name. Stay with me. This is worth 30 minutes of your day. Before anything else makes sense, you need to understand what you're actually looking at in that bowl. It is not dirt. I know it looks like dirt. Your mind sees a brown ring and jumps straight to the word filthy, and that word carries shame with it. And shame is exactly what sends you back to the store for a stronger bottle. But dirt sits on top of a surface. Mud sits on a boot. You can wipe it off. This is different. This grew into the surface, one invisible layer at a time. Every single time water touched that bowl, your water carries minerals in it, even water that looks perfectly clear. Every flush leaves behind a trace so small you'd never notice it happening. But traces add up. Over months, over years, they harden into a thin shell bonded right onto the glaze. There are 3 common kinds, and it helps to know them apart. A chalky white or gray buildup is lime, the same mineral that clogs up the inside of a kettle until it rattles when you pour. A rusty brown ring is iron, coming up through old pipes or a well, meeting air, and turning the color of a nail left out in the rain. A dark, almost black ring is manganese, a mineral that rides along in certain water supplies and is the hardest of the 3 to shift. 3 different colors, 3 different minerals, but they all share the one thing that matters most. They are not sitting on your porcelain. They are bonded to it. And you cannot scrub bonded mineral off with a brush, no matter how hard you try or how long you kneel there trying. Here is the part that nobody warns you about. While you scrub, you are damaging the very surface you're trying to save. A new toilet bowl is smooth, almost glassy. Every hard scrub, every gritty cleaning powder, every stiff bristled brush wears down that smoothness bit by bit. You can't see the damage with your eye, but each pass leaves microscopic scratches behind. And every one of those scratches becomes a new place for the next bit of mineral to catch and hold on to. So the surface gets a little rougher each time you clean it. And the rougher it gets, the faster the next stain sets in, and the deeper it goes before you even notice it's back. That is why the ring always seems to return worse than before. It genuinely is worse. You are not imagining it. You are, without meaning to, digging the foundation for the next stain every time you scrub the last one. So the answer was never a stronger arm. It was never a harsher chemical either. The real fix is something that dissolves that mineral shell gently, turning it into something loose enough for plain water to carry away on its own. No grinding, no gouging, no kneeling on a cold floor with your shoulder on fire. You pour it in. You walk away. The mineral lets go while you go do something better with your morning. That is what sat in my mother's tin. Let me tell you where this powder actually comes from, because it's a humble little story and I've always liked it. There's a small weed, wood sorrel, that grows in sidewalk cracks and along the shady side of fence rows. It's the kind of plant most people step right over without a second look. Children pick the leaves and chew them for the sour taste. I did it as a girl. My children do it now. That sharp, sour bite in the leaf is the very thing we're talking about. Old-timers called the powder made from it salts of sorrel, because that's exactly where it was first drawn from. A chemist in Sweden wrote the compound's name down on paper a long time back, somewhere around the founding of this country, but he didn't invent it any more than a man invents an apple by writing the word apple in a book. It was already there, in the sorrel, in rhubarb leaves, in the spinach growing in gardens right now. He just noticed it and gave it a name. What warms me about the story is that the women noticed it too, long before any book was written. The ones doing the wash, keeping the houses, whose names never made it into any record. By my husband's great-great-grandmother's time, this powder sat plainly in the general store under names like salts of sorrel and wood bleach. Farmers bought it to strip rust off their tools. Stonemasons bought it to bring stained marble steps back to white. And a wise housewife, with no money to waste, kept a small twist of it on the shelf by the wash basin, for the rust ring in the sink and the hard water stain in the tub. My grandmother kept hers in a paper twist inside a crock. My mother kept hers in a small tin, and that tin sits on my pantry shelf today because she pressed it into my hands the week I got married and told me exactly what it was for, the same way her mother had told her. None of this was ever hidden. It was so ordinary, so common, that nobody thought it was worth writing down anywhere, because every grandmother already had it and showed her daughters how to use it with her own two hands. And a thing every grandmother knows needs no book to keep it alive, right up until the day the grandmothers stopped teaching it. Then, in a single generation, something 200 years old can vanish as cleanly as if it never existed. Nobody destroyed it, nobody banned it, the teaching simply stopped in most homes. And a thing that isn't taught is a thing that gets lost. If this is the kind of plain help you came here for, go ahead and subscribe. And tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. Let me explain the chemistry simply, because it's a tidy piece of business, and I've always admired a tidy thing. The mineral shell in your bowl, whether it's lime, rust, or manganese, is locked tight against the glaze. This powder, oxalic acid, takes hold of that mineral and converts it into something else entirely. A loose form, a soft form, one that no longer clings to anything and simply dissolves into the water around it. So your next flush carries it away. That's the entire trick. The powder doesn't pry the mineral off the way a chisel or a brush would. It changes what the mineral is at its core. So it stops behaving like stone and starts behaving like something water can carry. And here's the part that matters most for your bowl itself. The glaze, that hard, glassy white surface, is left completely alone. The acid goes after the mineral and leaves the porcelain be. You finish with a surface as smooth as the day it left the kiln, instead of a surface left rough and scratched by harsh scrubbing powders. That smoothness matters more than people realize. The smoother the surface stays, the less the next bit of mineral has to grab onto. So every time you clean this way, the bowl actually resists staining a little better the next time around. You're not fighting the same losing battle every week. You're leaving the surface in better shape than you found it. Now, I've heard the way some folks talk products up, and my mother didn't raise me to oversell anything. A claim that falls apart under your own eyes only makes a liar of the person who made it. And I won't be made a liar in your bathroom. So let me give you the truth. Both halves of it. The good half first. This powder will clear years of buildup in about half an hour. A ring that's been sitting there since the day you moved in can disappear in one treatment. Maybe two for a truly stubborn case. You'll watch it happen with your own eyes, and most people can hardly believe what they're seeing the first time. Now the honest half. Will the stain stay gone forever? with nothing more ever asked of you? No. Don't trust anyone who tells you that. The stain came from your water in the first place, and as long as that water keeps running through your pipes, it will slowly begin leaving a little of itself behind again. That isn't the powder failing you. That's simply water being water. No powder on earth changes that basic fact. But here's the real difference, and it's the whole reason I'm telling you this. With store bottles, you fight a hard, built-up stain every single week, forever, and you lose a little ground each time because you're scratching the glaze rougher with every pass. With this powder, you clear the bowl down to bare, clean porcelain one time. After that, a light treatment twice a year, spring and fall, is enough to keep it from ever building into a real stain again, twice a year. Half an hour each time, about $1 of powder to carry you through the whole year, sometimes longer. That isn't never think about it again, because nothing in life truly works that way. But it's about as close to it as an honest woman can promise you. And it's a different world entirely from a cabinet full of bottles you keep buying, over and over, for the rest of your life. Let me tell you about something I watched happen with my own eyes, so you don't take this as just an old woman being fond of the old ways. There was a young wife down the road who had bought her first house, a tired old place close to 80 years old, sitting on hard well water thick with iron. The toilet in her hallway had a ring so deeply set that she'd simply given up on it. She kept the lid down and the door shut whenever people visited. She told me later that she'd spent more money than she wanted to admit on bottles, tablets, and a special brush over the course of 2 full years. Not one bit of it had moved that ring, not even a shade lighter. So I mixed her a cup of the powder in warm water, right there at her own kitchen counter. We let the bowl's water level drop, poured the mixture in, and then I made her do the hardest part of all for someone used to scrubbing. We sat down at her table, drank a cup of coffee, and did absolutely nothing for half an hour. She kept getting up to peek at it, and I kept telling her to sit back down and let it work. When we finally flushed it through, the ring was gone. 80 years on that house, 2 years of her fighting it on her knees, gone without a single bristle of a brush ever touching it. She stood there and got a little teary, if I'm honest. Then she got a bit frustrated, which I completely understood, because her very next words were, "Why did nobody ever tell me this?" That's exactly the right question to ask. You might be sitting there wondering the same thing. If this works so well, costs so little, and is so old, why isn't it sold in a bright bottle right next to everything else? Why didn't your own mother ever teach it to you? I'll answer you fairly, because I don't hold with crying conspiracy at every turn. Nobody in a back room ever banned this powder. It's sold openly, right this minute, in hardware stores everywhere. What actually happened is quieter than a conspiracy, and in some ways harder to sit with, because it didn't take a single person planning it. Think it through plainly. A powder that clears your stain for years, bought once and then forgotten on a shelf, makes nobody rich. There's no fortune in that. But a bottle that works for 3 weeks and then needs buying again and again and again after that? One bottle for the bowl, another for the tub, a tablet for the tank, a foam spray for the sink. That's a steady river of money that never runs dry, not because it cleans any better, but because it cleans briefly. Nobody had to sit down and decide to bury the old powder on purpose. The bright bottles simply had money behind them, and the plain powder had none. Money buys the shelf space at eye level, where your hand naturally falls. Money buys the advertisement playing while you eat supper. Money buys a small space in your mind, so that when you think stain, the very next thought is which bottle to reach for. The plain powder had nobody speaking up for it, because nobody gets rich selling something that lasts. So the bottles got louder, the grandmothers got quieter, and within a generation or two, knowledge that had lived in houses for 200 years slipped quietly out of most of them. Nobody stole it in the night. It was simply crowded out, slowly, by everyone who stands to profit the day it's finally forgotten. I'll name the one honest exception, because credit is owed where it's due. There's a scouring cleaner sold in a can, meant for pots and pans, that actually prints oxalic acid on its own label as the working ingredient, so the compound never fully vanished from store shelves. But even there, it's marketed only for cookware, never mentioned as the very same fix for your toilet bowl, your bathtub, or your grout lines. We kept it alive in my community for the simplest reason there is. We never had a store bottle to fall back on, so we never had the luxury of forgetting the cheap thing that actually worked. We wrote it down the only way that truly lasts. Not in any book, but in the hands of the next young woman setting up her own house. If you've stuck with me this far, subscribe now so the next one lands in front of you. There's more of these old fixes coming. Let me give you the exact steps, plainly and in order, so you can go do this yourself this week. Go to a hardware store, a paint store, or a farm and feed store. Ask for oxalic acid. If you get a blank look, ask instead for wood bleach, wood brightener, or rust remover crystals. These are all the same white powder sold under different names. A tub will run you somewhere between $2 and $6, and it will last you years. For the toilet bowl, start by getting the water level down, so the powder works directly on the stain instead of getting watered down. Reach behind the tank, find the small valve down low, and shut the water off. Flush once. The bowl will drain and stay low without refilling. Stir about 2 spoonfuls of the powder, roughly an ounce, into a pint of warm water in a plastic dish or an old container you don't mind dedicating to this. Stir until it's fully dissolved, with no grit left sitting on the bottom. Pour or brush the mixture directly onto the stained area. A cheap foam brush works fine for this, or you can carefully pour the solution all along the ring. Make sure it covers every bit of the stain around the bowl. Then walk away. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Go hang the wash, feed the animals, put the kettle on. Do not scrub during this time. I mean that sincerely. The chemistry is doing the work for you, and scrubbing only undoes its patience and scratches the glaze in the process. This waiting part is the piece everyone wants to skip, and it's the one part that matters most. Once the time is up, turn the water valve back on and flush twice. The stain should be gone. For a truly stubborn ring, one that's been there 20 years or more, simply pour, wait, and flush a second time. Even the worst of them tend to give up by the second round. For a rust ring in a sink, wet a cloth in the same solution and lay it directly over the rust. Leave it for 20 minutes, then wipe it away. For scale built up in a bathtub, brush the solution along the gray line, give it 20 minutes, and rinse. For grout that's gone dark with iron, work the mixture into the line with an old toothbrush. Give it 10 minutes, and rinse clean. People always ask 3 questions, and I want to answer them here fully and plainly. First, is it safe? It's an acid, and yes, I'll say that outright rather than tiptoe around it. It's a mild one. Wear rubber gloves because it can sting and dry out bare skin if you let it sit there too long. Open a window or run a fan, not because it chokes you the way bleach does, since it doesn't, but because good airflow is simply good sense anytime you're cleaning. Never mix it with bleach, or with anything that already contains bleach. As a general rule, never mix any 2 cleaning products together at all, especially bottled ones from the store. Keep the tin up high, out of the reach of little ones, the same way you'd store matches or medicine. It exists in small amounts in something as ordinary as a rhubarb leaf, but that doesn't make it something to eat, and a small child has no way of knowing that, so it falls to you to know it for them. Keep it up high, clearly labeled, and out of reach. Second question, will it damage my porcelain or harm my pipes? No. As I've explained, the glaze itself is left whole and untouched because the acid targets mineral, not porcelain. Use the way I've described. With 2 good flushes afterward, it does no harm at all to your plumbing. Rinse thoroughly, follow the steps, and everything will be just fine. The third question always makes me a touch sad to answer. Sometimes someone mentions what I've told them to a hardware store clerk or a salesperson, and that person tells them to buy the name brand bottle instead, that some Amish woman's advice about a bathroom isn't worth listening to. I don't think that man is dishonest. I think he was taught this way by people who were taught wrong before him, by people who were paid to teach it that way. That chain stretches back 50 years or longer, and you happen to be standing right at the end of it. But you don't have to stay standing there. Try the powder once, on your very worst stain, and let your own 2 eyes settle the matter for you. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. Subscribe if you'd like more of these, and pass what you learned today along to someone just starting out on their own. A daughter, a son, a neighbor, setting up her first home with a cabinet already filling up with bottles she'll never actually need. That's exactly how this knowledge survived for 200 years. Not in a book, but handed from one pair of hands to the next. Next time, the good Lord willing, I'll show you what my mother kept in the summer kitchen to keep the ants and flies from ever crossing the door. No spray, no poison, no truck pulling up with a bill attached. Just one simple thing you very likely already have on your own shelf. Used the right way at the right time. Keep your gloves on, keep the tin up high, and take care of yourselves.